the people who should be our generational successors are not necessarily the mathematicians. Some of them will be, but also the people who are web developers are, I think, part of our generational successors. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to think back of motoring. In Britain, we date motoring back to about 1896, which was called the Emancipation Act. Before that time, a automobile, as the Americans call it, was treated much the same way as a steam traction engine. And you had to have a man carrying a red flag walking in front of it to warn the passers-by. And the Emancipation Act removed that requirement, and it was celebrated by the London-Brighton Run, which continues to take place every year, where all these old bangers and their cars drive from London to Brighton. So if we go from 1896 to 1926, enormous change. And the whole nature of motoring had changed. And one of the big changes was the electric starter. That was an enormous change because previously you had to hand crank it, and if the thing backfired, it could do you a mischief. And if you were a lady motorist, you wouldn't want to be hand cranking a car anyway. So a push button electric starter makes a big difference. And without showing any disrespect, and that's none intended, the modern computers we have now are generations ahead of the sort of things that Nelson and I had in the 1970s or 1980s. And if we go back to 1950 or so, and Maurice Wilkes, who founded the Cambridge Computer Laboratory, well, he started by building his own computer, building his own mercury delay memory lines. So the idea that you can go to your web browser and purchase a computer off the shelf, it's just extraordinary. 60 years, 50 years ago, that would be quite surprising. In fact, it was only the sort of the homebrew computer club in Silicon Valley sort of area, and the early Apples and that sort of thing, where the personal computer as a dream and everything else started going. And that was, I think, in the late 70s, very late 70s. So there's an enormous change. And whilst the way in which we learn calculus doesn't change that much, mathematics has got a very, very long shelf life. I think the way in which we learn tech is falling behind the times, and we have to do some work if we're going to get as many beginners as we deserve to have. And anybody that needs to put a bit of mathematics into a web page, and when I say a web page, it might be a forum post. I'm writing a post to my friends about a piece of mathematics I learned, social media post, that sort of thing. So that is my idea of a beginner. So that's the end of my speech, if you like. And I'm very grateful that we shared all this experience. And in some sense, I've got a problem because I run the Tech Hour, and my problem is getting the right people. And it's not just the right people, but the right mix of people. And we need more young people, and I don't quite know how to get them. If I wasn't retired, I might be able to persuade my students to come along. So I'll stop at that point.